Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Holland Podcast. It is almost a natural condition of college football fandom, or I guess sports fandom in general, to believe that when things go poorly for your team of rooting interest, your alma mater in this case, that nobody has it as bad as me and my fan base. Maybe not after this weekend, but you could probably, after their most recent losses, found Alabama, Ohio State, or Oklahoma fans, just to use a few examples, who would want to tell you how hard their lot in life is as a sports fan. Even like if you're like me, you believe that U of H fans have a lot to be grateful for in the past 15, 20 years of watching this football team, it doesn't feel a whole lot worse than going through 9+ months of offseason to get to an opener where your team played catastrophically badly in the phase of the game that involves scoring points, which was what happened for Cougar football a couple nights ago at 3 nights ago at TDECU Stadium. That was a rough watch, and even if we can find some positives tonight, you can, in the broadest sense, only say so much nice about a decisive home opener loss. The kind of loss where the Cougs had 7 total points, and that number probably oversells the offensive performance. Bobby, we've now had a few days to fully process this. Where are you at now versus where you were when we sat down shortly after to kind of do our instant react?
I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of in the same spot. Like, not to sound too crazy, but just like, maybe I think the difference is from preseason to, before kickoff and where I am now, that's drastically changed. But post game and where I sit now, nothing's really changed. I still feel pretty much how I felt going into that. So, I don't feel much different. I don't feel good, but I don't feel much different.
Yeah, I think you can only put so much lipstick on the pig, but also kind of like I said in the intro, it's not all negative. There are aspects in which this team played well. It's just if you're this fan base that likes offense as much as we do, if so much of U of H's historic identity is around offense, it doesn't make you feel great to watch 60 minutes of your team just doing offense quite poorly. So we're going to get into that. We have a couple of other Cougar sports to talk about, including the Cougar volleyball program, giving us a much more positive start to their season. Then the football program, I'm going to mention some housekeeping at the top. Patreon.com/SH podcast. If you like what we do, if you could spare as little as 16 cents a day to support what Bobby and I do here on a weekly basis. We, right after, less than an hour after the game went final, did a 40-something minute instant react podcast, which I am very proud of. Bobby braved the late evening on one of his busiest weekends of the year to give you the premium content to our patrons. Proud of what we did there. If that sounds good to you, if the idea of, I say, sending a few of your discretionary dollars a month our way appeals to you, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast, support our show. And big thanks to those of you that are listening tonight and do that already. You are rock stars. You're the people that keep us doing what we do a couple different times a week. And of course, please support our friends at Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com on the World Wide Web. They just dropped those fantastic. If you're like us, you still very much believe in Willie Fritz and what he's going to build here with Cougar football. You get these fantastic In Fritz We Trust shirts, as well as just a fantastic top to bottom Cougar collection, new varsity jackets as well. Well worth the price tag. And if you want to save a little on that price tag, I think if you're listening, you probably want to save some amount of money. Use our promo code POD15, PAWD 15. Like podcast, it's going to save you 15%, not 15% off your first order or new customer. That's 15% off any Charlie Hustle order. Really fantastic deal. And you're showing the folks at Charlie Hustle that we're the incredible partners that we strive to be. So that's Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com on the World Wide Web. Please support our partners and get yourself some fantastic, incredibly comfortable vintage Cougar. I didn't even mention I'm wearing the Charlie Hustle Cougar football helmet shirt because I'm still on the Cougar football train. I still believe in this staff, even if it's not looking like a season that maybe is going to be one of our historically best. If Bobby, if you were someone emotionally investing in the idea that this was going to be the 2015 season, that was going to be a repeat of Herman's first year, I would first off go consult a neurologist, because this was never going to be that kind of year. This was never going to be a team that went 13-1 out of nowhere. But I understand if you're someone who is a little disappointed at that game, at that start of the season. I'll get us started here, Bobby, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Don't
go
think
ahead,
I
bud.
need to do anything more than a very cursory recap of this game. If you are listening or watching this, you probably have a pretty good idea of what happened. UNLV was stopped at 4th and short in their opening possession, which gave me, I think, some false hope that the Cougs might win this game, but ultimately did find pay dirt in their second possession, which was there probably enough to win the game, going up 7-0. Had a lot of help from a 42-yard trick play pass completion from D'Angelo Irvin Jr. to Jaden Bradley. UNLV would double the lead in the second quarter on a really nice throw from Matthew Sluka, even nicer catch by Jacob DeJesus, toe tapping along the sidelines, put the Rebels up 14-0. That was actually UNLV's last offensive touchdown of the game, but the Cougar offense was so futile at all points this game that it basically didn't matter. Donovan Smith got pressure in his face nearly every time he dropped back. Comically quick pressure, was sacked 5 times, and the few times that Smith wasn't immediately getting snowed under by Rebel defensive pressure, his decision-making seemed a step slow. The throws seemed like they were coming from a rusty quarterback. No running game to speak of because there were no running lanes to speak of. No downfield passing game because the pass blocking wasn't even giving Smith a fraction of the time that you would need for a downfield kind of passing game. UNLV did add 2 more second half field goals on fairly short drives that started in extremely good field position. Also got a defensive TD from Jalen Catalon on a bad Smith throw that led to a pick 6. Did get a garbage time touchdown from Uyale, backup quarterback, to Joseph Manjack to break up the shutout on the final U of H possession. Bobby, why don't you start us out with something that was kind of your brainchild here, something we're going to do week in, week out when we recap each Cougar football game?
Yeah, so we're gonna call this little, I guess you could call it segment, if we're going old school radio guy style,
And we always are. So
yeah, this segment here is what I'm gonna call the 3 key plays that you might have missed and overlooked. All right, so the first one is after the flea flicker, we get a pretty good stop here. They have that long flea flicker, which you probably remember. That's not the play I'm talking about. Bad PI there, bad play, but sometimes you get beat with a trick play. It happens. You want your guys to be a little bit better, but even the best teams fall for trick plays. But the next play, you get a good stop, you make a good tackle in the backfield, defensive holding. That's huge, right? You come back, you make the play. In fact, I can't remember who it was who got burnt on who got beat on the flea flicker and then made the tackle the next play. That's a great play. But defensive hold, Webb gets beat and then he comes back and makes a big play. That's something you want to build on, right? That's something where your guy goes, oh, hey, that wasn't the best. I can really, I can improve upon this. That shows that short memory that you kind of want from your defenders, things like that. You also had a punt return that was going to be a big play for the Cougs, and it gets called back on a holding call. And honestly, it was a good holding call. Like, it wasn't even one of those ticky-tack kind of calls that you kind of see. And then I think probably the biggest play, it is a third down. Cougars go for it and pick up the first down. It's like 3rd and 2, 4th and 2. Come out, pick it up. Pick up the first down, big play on a pitch, on a toss play, get the run. It kind of felt like the momentum was starting to pick up with this offense a little bit before that Donovan Smith. But the reason why that's a big play, it's not because you got the first down, but it's because you got the first down, but it was called back due to an offensive holding. Takes you back. The very next play is the pick 6 by Donovan Smith on the screenplay. Right, if you pick that first down up, you don't have the holding there. Does the pick 6 happen? You have a drive that's driving. You've picked up a first down, one of your few ones, things like that. You're doing really well on that drive. The offense finally looks like it's clicking. Donovan Smith looks like he's getting into a little bit of a zone here. You've gotten some big plays. Third and 12, pick 6.
Yeah, at the very least, you're not putting your, obviously you don't know what happens on 1st and 10, but like you have a whole lot more in your playbook for 1st and 10 than 3rd and greater
12.
than 10. They're 3rd and 12. Like as much as it was a bad throw, as much as I don't think that's defensible. Yeah, I mean you're in a better position. Like something different might happen. You might not win the game, but at least you might get some more offensive rhythm. So I actually have my first one is not the same play, but it is a play from that first UNLV touchdown drive. I don't know if it was a huge impact one, but one that I think was reflective of some of the positive things I actually saw. It was a play in the end zone. The Latrell McCutcheon separating UNLV receiver Jaden Bradley from the ball. I think obviously in the grand scheme of things, a huge play because UNLV ended up scoring that same drive, but I think it was kind of a demonstration of a secondary that is a lot less averse to contact. It did a lot better job the few times UNLV passed, actually separating the guys from the ball, actually being near enough to an opposing receiver. I think that was one of the things that drove me most nuts the last couple of years. It always felt we dropped 5 or 6 guys, and it never felt like it would like the opposing receiver would catch the ball, and there'd be like 2 or 3 Cougar defenders nowhere close enough to actually make a play. I thought of the few positives you get from this game, I thought that was that one play is kind of a reflection of a secondary that seemed more about the action, seemed more able to play physically. My second one should have told us what a long game we had ahead of us. It was Donovan Smith getting sacked on that 4th down try on the Cougs' second possession. And then there were so many times in this game where Smith faced some extremely difficult form of pressure. I don't know if there was one more hopeless than this one. It was basically a 1 Mississippi count, and Smith was stacked. I think days later, I'm still stunned a college offensive line did as badly as U of H's did on that play. And my third one, not saying this one impacted the win or the loss, but few things frustrate me more than Jack Martin missing a 42-yard field goal. And I think it's a very minor thing, but the thing that is so minor, it is not a substantive criticism of Willie Fritz and the staff. I think they messed up not getting a kicker from the portal. Like Jack Martin is in his 5th year in college, and as far as I can tell, Bobby, wasn't unideal conditions in Houston. So it was actually like, it's cool, wasn't super windy. You can't miss that. You can never fucking miss that.
Yeah, that's one you have to have trust that your kicker is going to make a 42-yarder.
Yeah, or just like UNLV had a freshman kicker out there, and he kicked something I think that was low on the one that got blocked when they were deep in Cougar territory. Like, if it's a freshman kicker, you maybe could stomach it a little bit. Jack Martin seems like a good kid, 5th year in college, can't be missing that. And frankly, given the number of kickers out there who I think could do that, I don't think every college place kicker with a range above 40 yards is getting hoovered up by the SEC and Big Ten and bigger resource Big 12 programs. I think there was a better kicker out there than Jack Martin. So yeah, I think again, does Jack Martin hitting that affect the win or the loss? No, but I think it was, I was very frustrated about it, and very frustrated in a way that's not like, oh, it's going to take years to fix. It's like, fuck, we couldn't have found a better place kicker than this. Like that. Yeah. Those are my 3 plays. Bobby, let's start by talking the side of the ball that we don't actually feel terrible about, the Cougar defense. Okay, what did you think about the Cougar defense on Saturday night?
I was actually really impressed with the Cougar defense. We talked about this on the post-game show, but it was, I think we said 10 of those points are kind of, 7 came from the pick six.
Yeah, 20 of them came, directly from the UNLV offense in some form or fashion. Only one came on a drive longer than 60 yards.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was going with that. And 2 of the touchdowns came on drives, which I think might have even started in the U of H territory.
Yep.
So like, what else can you expect from your defense? They got decent pressure on the quarterback at times. Nothing that made me go like, oh, we're dominating them like we felt on the other side of the ball, right? But it didn't feel like he had all day to throw. One of the touchdowns actually came on that just magnificent throw and catch. Their second touchdown, that catch that they made right there in the end zone on the side of the on the sideline in the end zone. Just great play. But what you might not remember is we got pressure on that play. That's a quarterback making a play there, you know? And you know, he made that play, really good play by him. But I was overall pretty happy with how the defense played. I thought the defensive pressure was good. We didn't let them run too much on us. I mean, you look at the stats and it kind of feels like they did, but it never really felt like they were breaking off long runs. It just kind of felt like they were just having a couple of good runs, and some of those, I think the average was like 4 or 5. I'm trying to scatter while I get there. And so I wasn't disappointed with the defense at all. I think there were some good plays. I don't think it was a perfect effort. I wouldn't say it was like an A+ effort, but I wouldn't see any problem giving the defense a B+. And I think that is what they got. And I thought that's kind of what I expected, maybe even a little bit better than I expected from them heading into this year after what I saw last year.
I guess I'll get my bad out of the way in terms of the good and the bad that we saw. It's not even that bad, because I think I on the balance, I think I generally agree with you in terms of how the defense did. I would say it's probably slightly better than I expected in the balance. But UNLV is going to be one of, if not the most run-centric teams the Cougs play this season. So we didn't really get a torture test of the Cougar secondary, though we saw good stuff from AJ Halsey, Latrell McCutcheon, and Kriston Davis, among others. We also saw that pretty bad Kentrell Webb PI you mentioned earlier, that we were told from multiple people in the stadium could have been an INT on that long UNLV trick pass completion that set them up deep in U of H territory. There was also that 50-yard completion that thankfully did not count to Ricky White, where U of H dropped 8, and somehow Ricky White got way open, but was thankfully negated by a hold on a UNLV offensive lineman. I thought in the first half the tackling was kind of come and go. I mean, two of their UNLV's quarterback, Matthew Sluka's longer runs were on what looked like broken plays to me, where multiple UH defenders missed a chance to bring down Sluka for no gain or not much of a gain. But I'll also say Sluka's going to be one of the better running quarterbacks U of H sees this season, and he never absolutely gashed the Cougars when he called his own number in the run game. And that kind of goes into what I liked. I mean, 195 rushing yards doesn't look great, but when your opponent runs the ball almost 50 times, you have to put that into context. 36 of those yards were on one run by Michael Allen. And do you give the defense a pass that run? No, it was an awful job setting the edge there. There's no reason he should have got 36 yards there. And by virtue of UNLV's freshman kicker kicking it low and getting it partially blocked, you didn't come out of that situation with any points. But if you want to grade the entire 4 quarters, I mean, run defense coming into the season, Bobby, would you say the linebacker group or defensive line were our biggest concerns when we previewed that defense? I think linebacker was my pick and defensive line was your pick for we were most concerned about.
And going into this game, there was a massive concern with it, right? We were like, man, this team doesn't tackle. Like last year, they didn't tackle very well. Like if we're just being honest, and so there was a lot of that concern heading into this game. And while to your point, it wasn't like we came out and we held them and we made them not play the game that they want to play. The defense in the defensive line and linebackers made some plays. They really made some plays. To your point again, that 36-yard run, bad play, but sometimes you're just going to get beat. Like I excuse a bad play here or there, like the PI on the trick play. Sometimes you don't set the edge, guy makes a bad read. It's football. It happens. But as long as it's not happening consistently, right? As long as there's not 5 36-yard runs, I'm all right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there will be better rushing attacks on the schedule, but I think what's all said and done, this opponent will be one of the better rushing offenses that the Cougar defense sees, and despite this game being so many new faces getting snaps, I think you saw, especially in the last 2 quarters, better tackling, guys going the right spots, better effort than we saw at any point over the previous 2 seasons. Like I mentioned earlier, a much more physically impactful performance from your guys in the secondary as well. Really nice 3rd quarter interception by AJ Halsey that bailed out that abysmal shanked punt that
Oh.
started the Cougar D deep in their own territory. I think all we wanted to see coming into this game from the defense was them playing well enough to allow the team to stay in this game. And they did it. I mean, look at UNLV's last 6 possessions in this game, excluding the time they got the ball back for the last few seconds. Punt, made field goal to drive that started in U of H territory, interception, punt, made field goal on a drive that literally started at U of H's 30-yard line. That's 6 points allowed in 6 possessions to essentially close the game. If the offense had figured anything out during that stretch, that effort would have been enough to make a game of it. UNLV's offense had 4 scoring drives the entire game. You said earlier, 2 of them started in UH territory, and 1 was just barely on the Rebel side of the field. And maybe once the season's done, this game was an outlier and the Cougar defense ends up actually struggling for most of the season. None of us know that yet, but I think before the two of us wallow, and we'll be doing some wallowing in that just pitiful offensive performance, we should call this what it is. A good defensive performance, and speaking for, I think, both of us here, a better defensive performance than we expected when we previewed the season and previewed this opponent.
Yeah, I think this UNLV team scored a lot last year with that go-go offense. They weren't, even though they run a lot, they were not a team that didn't put the ball in the end zone. And they scored 27. And again, 7 came on a pick 6, and 2 of the scoring drives came on drives less than 50 yards, or less than 60 is what you said earlier, right? So, like, what else can you ask out of this defense?
You're expecting an A-plus performance. I think you're being unrealistic with how many new faces there were.
And the team you're playing had a good offense. So it's like what would an A-plus performance look like here, right? You're holding them to sub 100 yards, and now they're passing.
Kentrell Webb picks that trick pass instead of doing PI, I guess.
It's like okay.
You set the edge against Michael Allen.
Yeah, I mean, you were a couple of plays that you can kind of go, I get them. From being an A-plus effort, you can't ask for much more. Holding this team to 20 points that the offense that their offense produced, that's kind of what I'm looking for out of my defense.
Bobby, to transition to our other topic here, I'm going to ask you the toughest question that I think I'm going to ask you this entire show. Because we're kind of thinking, what's the good, the bad? What good can you possibly find from Saturday night's offensive performance?
There were some,
because we kind of we behind the curtain here when we like kind of broke down how we're going to talk about this game. It's like, okay, was the good and the bad with the defense, the good and the bad with the offense, and I just kind of thought to myself, what good did the offense do?
I think there were a couple of good runs. I think you had some moments from players, you had a couple of good moments, right? You had that last drive that was good, but then, you have the caveat of it being against, the nearest defender. I think our friend Parker, said that was like their 11th DB on their depth chart when he went back and looked. That's like, sure, that's a great drive. We scored. I'm glad we didn't get, skunked at our own stadium, but you did it against UNLV's backups. So I think there were decent moments, but nothing that I'd be like, oh yeah, this was a good thing we did consistently. I don't think there was.
I spent days thinking about this. The best I could come up with was the one time each that Rashawn Sanford and Parker Jenkins had any space in front of them. They both broke off 10-plus yard runs and reminded you, oh yeah, if these guys were playing a functional offense, they'd be pretty fun right now. And another guy to that end, Mekhi Muse, looked really dangerous in the open field a couple different times on Saturday night. The long reception he had in the third quarter that really flipped the field, unfortunately ended up being a drive that ended in a missed field goal. And that long punt return that we mentioned earlier that got called back for a hold. Like, this guy is really good in space. Like, if this offense can figure out some way to get the guy the ball consistently in the open field, I think he's going to do some fun stuff. But that's all I have, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I could be like, oh yeah, no, we had this. There were, to your point, 2 good runs that I was kind of happy about.
What scares me about this game, and I've said this to you off air, what scares me about how bad this offense performed is that even though I think UNLV made themselves better in the offseason, added some really good transfers, Jalen Catalan, who had that pick 6, and Tony Grimes, the former 5-star recruit, and also having a well-respected defensive mind in Barry Odom as their head coach, this won't be one of the better defenses U of H sees this season. I'd be shocked if UNLV is better than 10th out of the 12 regular season opponents. And I think to say they dominated the Cougs up front undersells it. This defensive front wasn't even supposed to be the strength of their defense. Like, players can get better year on year, but this is a defense that had total last year of 20 sacks in 14 games and didn't really add any instant impact guys in the defensive front like they did in the secondary. I mean, 5 sacks allowed, 2 intentional grounding penalties that were a direct result of a UNLV guy being right in Donovan Smith's face, and countless more plays where there just wasn't a prayer of anything positive happening because you had multiple defenders in the backfield by the time you get to a 2 Mississippi count. The run blocking wasn't that much better, if at all. I mean, your longest run of the day was an 18-yard run by your backup quarterback, Zion Chris, that was pretty much improvising off a broken play. You saw offensive linemen play passively, just from all available evidence, letting defenders run free into the backfield, being very obviously confused about who's supposed to block where and when. It wasn't just guys getting beat at the point of attack. It was obvious confusion about assignments too. I mean, where do you even start with this, Bobby?
I mean, Sam, I went back and watched every single offensive snap of this game because host emeritus Dustin and I and our friend Bill were going back and forth on the on
debates.
Twitter. Spirited debates on Twitter. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I'm being unfair. Sam, this was an absolute, one of the worst offensive line performances I've ever seen in any football game. And I'm not saying that like, oh yeah, I've sat down and broken down a lot of different offensive tape in my life. I'm not that kind of guy who's going to be on this podcast. It's just not, that's just not me. But I went back through and I watched it, and Sam, just to start, before we even talk about Donovan Smith and playing who's going to play quarterback and things like that, before we even get like that, I've never seen so many offensive linemen on the ground in a game. And I'm not talking like they made it to the second level and a guy fell into them and the running back was running behind him and they fell. It's just guys getting beat on their back like a turtle, just there with their arms in the air, just getting beat. I want to say I have to go back through the notes, but there were, I think there were 4 times where a guy just came through untouched. There was a play where Donovan Smith sets back to throw it and he takes a sack, and he probably shouldn't have taken the sack. He did not trust that the guy running free was going to get picked up by the running back. He should have just, you got to kind of trust it. But by that point, I think he'd been sacked twice. The 4th down that you had talked about earlier where there were guys in his face immediately have already happened. You could tell he was starting to get happy feet. He takes the sack there. Okay. Bad play by Donovan Smith. The next play, Sam, guy comes untouched, is scraped by the running back who shouldn't be taking on that free blitzer in the first place. Because it's not like they brought 6. They brought 5. You brought 1 extra guy. There's 5 linemen, right? He comes untouched, just slightly chipped by the running back. Before Donovan Smith can pick his head up from receiving the snap, he's in the backfield and he's having to scramble outright. He managed to get rid of the ball to avoid the safety, but it's just like, it's so bad. To your point, there was confusion on protection. There was confusion about what was going on. There was a play where literally the commentator, Robert Smith, is going, you got to find some action. You have to find action. And I can't remember who it was. It's the right guard.
Tank Jenkins.
And Tank Jenkins is standing there. And literally he just they snap the ball and he throws an arm out at the guy, not in front of him, just kind of and then as Donovan Smith is pedaling for his life, running for his life, you see him standing there like, who should I block? It's like, the guy in front of you, block him. Block him. Please just block him. I know that there's probably some crazy scheme or anything like that. I can tell you the one guy that you should block, at least touch the guy in front of you. At least touch him and don't let him run free to your quarterback.
It's a damning indictment that the two guys who started on the right side of this offensive line are both in at least their 6th season playing college football, that they looked so bad at the fundamentals of playing their respective positions. There are not many young guys in the 2 deep. It's basically your starting center, Pancake Hunter, who's a redshirt sophomore, and your backup left guard, Caden Bowie's a redshirt freshman, which makes this whole situation even scarier. It's not a kind of situation where you're running out a bunch of 2nd and 3rd year college players and there's some hope that these guys can gel with time playing together and improve just as they mature physically over their college career. I mean, here are your starting 5 from the UNLV game, Bobby, who are the same starting 5 listed as the starters on the depth chart prior to this week's game. Here you go. 5th-year junior, 3rd-year sophomore, Hunter, 7th-year senior, and a 6th-year senior. That terrible offensive line was nearly entirely guys with several years at the college level. I mean, you are what you are. Experience does not negate talent and a whole host of other factors, and that experience doesn't negate the fact that these guys all haven't played together that much, though all but one of the 5 that I mentioned were returning U of H players. You would have thought having grown men mostly out there would raise the floor a bit in terms of the performance. And for this past week, you would have been wrong, but you might have thought that, which I think is just another layer of disappointment on top of everything you said. Just I don't know that I've seen a worse offensive line performance. I've seen some ones in the range of this, some really bad ones. I think especially Tony Levine's 1st and 3rd season, you saw a lot of really bad offensive line play. Dana Holgerson's 1st and 2nd year, really, as much as I want to dig Dana Holgerson for things, and you could dig Dana Holgerson for this. Like, this is paying the piper for shitty offensive line recruiting. And this has been pointed out. Remember, Bobby, the 2 best offensive linemen on last year's team were guys that were signed by the previous staff. In Paul's case, as a recruit. In Jack Freeman's case, he actually was in the program, Major Applewhites, last year here. Like, this is paying the piper for doing a really bad job, whether through high school offensive linemen or the portal, bringing in guys who make an impact at that position. Like, it's usually not that cut and dry, but I think if you really want to diagnose like root cause of why this position group is so deficient, look at the last staff that's no longer here. Like, that's obviously it's on the staff, and Fritz was very blunt in his post-game assessment that it is on me to get more out of these players, to know what they do well and to know what they don't do well. But it's not really Fritz poor coaching that is why this offensive line largely didn't look like they knew what they were doing out there. And that's a harsh assessment, but I don't think the game that we saw deserves anything less than a harsh assessment.
No, it was just an absolute awful performance. And I would love to say that, like, oh, they were bad at pass protection, but they were good at running, running the ball and things like that. No, we couldn't run the ball. We couldn't pass the ball. We didn't have time to do anything with your offensive line, which leads me to, if you're ready, another discussion that we need to have.
Exactly.
Right.
I know exactly where you're going to.
And the discussion is who should play quarterback for this team. Now, I want to say I was one who was defending Donovan Smith. And my thought behind it is not that I thought Donovan Smith was necessarily good. Let me clear that up here. Donovan Smith was okay on Saturday when he had the time, but the key word there is when he had the time. Bringing in a new quarterback is not going to fix this situation. And, we want to talk about the Chris drive, okay? Again, I went through and I watched every offensive play. Deion Chris looked good. He looked fine. But when you really think about that drive, everyone, you got to bring somebody else in. Deion Chris on that drive didn't throw the ball once. So, unless we're running the triple option, unless we're going to become Navy.
Hey, don't threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? But like, okay, he moved the ball that drive. But when you really think about it, how he moved the ball that drive was the clap, right? He didn't start, the drive didn't start very well. You had the clap that drew the guy offside, right? And if you go back and watch that play, literally everyone stopped playing on that defense. Their D-line didn't rush after the ball was snapped. The guy who jumped offside was moving backwards and stood up completely. So there's one guy eliminated. The second guy, the two nose tackles or the two defensive tackles didn't rush right away when the ball was snapped. There was confusion there. And then the other defensive end kind of went slowly. I genuinely think they thought there was going to be an unevaded called there. And so he wasn't going to get touched and they were just going to blow it dead, but they didn't. He dropped back to throw. Nobody's open, but there's no rushing. There's no rush coming to him. So he just steps to the side. It was a 3rd and 12. So everyone's dropped back, right? Maybe it was a 2nd and 12. Either way, everyone's dropped back. They're playing don't get beat deep, right? Play to the sticks. He runs up. He's got more space than he knows what to do with out in front of him. Makes the read, goes out and run. Good play, but he wasn't experiencing any kind of defensive pressure, any pressure, because they basically didn't rush out of confusion, right? So then you're like, oh, but they still drove. The Cougs still drove that drive. The next play, stuffed in the backfield for a loss of 2, maybe the loss of 3. Targeting. Well, now your drive looks really good, and you were an offside call that stopped them from rushing you at all, which that could happen to any quarterback. It's not like Gioncrist did anything special there, right? And then that drive stalled. It's not like he took him down and scored, right? Like, he had the good run. You got the targeting call. And then it stalled out at like the 50. So is that really much better? And then people want to talk about Ale, like he wasn't going up against the 3rd string. I'm not saying that Donovan Smith was good. There were 7 dropbacks that I counted. So he dropped back about 32, 33 times and had to make a play. 7 of them, he made a bad throw. He made some awful throws. There was one to a guy out in the flat early in the 3rd quarter that was just one of the worst throws I've ever seen in my life. It fluttered. It was awful. He had the guy open. There was one in the 1st quarter where he overthrew the receiver by about 7 yards out of bounds. Terrible throw.
Along the sideline, right?
Yeah. So again, I'm not saying he was good, but he had 7 bad throws, or maybe held the ball too long and took the sack, like that one that I mentioned earlier, where he kind of didn't trust that the blitz was going to get picked up. Then I counted 13 plays where Donovan Smith had time and made a good play or throw, right? And a lot of his completions were short bubbles, things like that. One of those was the man-jack drop. So little things like that, but where I thought, yeah, that was a decent little play there. And then 12 plays where the O-line could have given him better pass protection or was blown up in the backfield on a run. Sam, I don't care what quarterback you put back there. If over half the time that he goes back to make a play, he has pressure in his face within 2 seconds, no quarterback is going to look good. And just taking Donovan Smith out and putting in Gioncrist is not going to fix the problem, because Gioncrist is going to get the same pressure. It's not so you're not replacing him with Greg Ward. It's not like you could see when O'Korn was struggling that maybe if Greg Ward could do something, he had like a different skill set overall. And I'm not saying that Donovan Smith is as good of a runner, but the difference between John O'Korn and Greg Ward is way bigger than the difference between Donovan Smith and Gioncrist. No quarterback is going to be successful behind this offensive line if this offensive line plays the same way it did. You could put Tom Brady back there, and he would have had 7 opportunities to make a better play than Donovan Smith did.
It would sacked like, it's 44-year-old Tom Brady who has sacked like 13 times.
Yes, he would have been, yeah. Hey, you think about these 12 where they could have given him better protection or was blown up in the backfield from a run. That's where Donovan Smith scrambles out and manages to get rid of it. There were 12 plays. There was one play that was a run play that you actually texted me on during the game, and you were like, dude, he just ran out of bounds for a loss of 6 on a first down. What was he thinking? And then I went back and I just watched the replay right there, just like rewound TV. And I was like, and I sent you a picture of it, and I was like, you see these 3 guys right here on the edge? There was nowhere for him to go. But maybe lower the shoulder, cool, but like, it wasn't going anywhere. Yeah. Don't take the hit. Shit, you got a bum shoulder. Don't take a hit. Like it doesn't matter the quarterback you put back here. It's not going to work with this offensive line.
Yeah, the O-line play in front of Smith is atrocious, and it's problem number one, bolded problem number one. And I don't think any reasonable mind should disagree with that, because just, no other brain cell should have the take that this offense is a QB change away from being a good one. I mean, without better O-line play, you could run out a who's who of the greatest U of H quarterbacks in their prime this century. And if they're behind this offensive line, and if they play the way they did on Saturday, the overall results I don't think would be appreciably better. I still don't see a quarterback in Smith who makes decisions quick enough, who makes the right ones often enough, and has necessary touch on throws. And I think we mostly agree on that. But Donovan Smith will look better if the inputs around him, mainly the offensive line, improve such that he's actually having some time to survey the field and throw, or the run blocking is functional enough that you could actually have a run game with Parker Jenkins and Rashawn Sanford capable of taking the pressure off, because you don't have anything close to any of those things right now. And I still don't believe, even if you had those things, that Smith would be good enough to justify not giving the snaps potentially to guys who have eligibility next year, like Zion Chris or Uyale, if the season doesn't get better. But, I mean, I'm under no illusions that Fritz and his staff will make a quarterback change after week one, nor should they really. I think on the important points, we agree on Donovan Smith. And I think it's funny, since the game, I'm probably 10% less harsh on Donovan than I was when the game ended. And I think you're 10% more harsh. Like, oh yeah, that throw was a real dog. Like that was not good. Whereas I'm just kind of like, yeah, the opportunities he actually really had to make a play were pretty few and far between.
Yeah, it was just, again, it's not that I think Donovan Smith is going to win a Heisman this year if you put him behind an offensive line that is competent. I can see people's concerns with his decision making and things like that. But again, it's not the problem. Putting him in switching it up, and look, if this is game 9, right, I feel a lot different. I'm like, you know what, put Zion Christian, see what you got. He's got eligibility left, to your point, right?
That was my point. But, not like this week, but
yeah,
if we're one, if we're 1-7 in a couple of months,
do it live.
Like, yeah, see what Uyale and Zion Chris can do.
Yeah, but right now, after one game, it's again, it's not like you put in Zion Christian and suddenly you're gonna be a 2-point favorite going into Norman. It's not like the spread's suddenly gonna get smaller or anything like that. Like it until your offensive line proves that they can play offensive line, it doesn't matter. Again, I've said it 7 times. It doesn't matter who you put back there. No quarterback is going to be successful.
Anything else you want to hit on from this no good, very bad football game, Bobby, before we talk about this coming week's opponent?
No, let's do it, buddy.
All right. No pressure. Up next to the Cougars are the number 15 Oklahoma Sooners in Norman, a notoriously hard place to play, even as Oklahoma is coming off 2 seasons that I would say aren't vintage standard for a program that has been very, very good for most every season in the last 50 or 60. And it's kind of hard to tell what the Sooners are in 2024, because they were as vanilla as humanly possible in that 51-3 blowout win over Temple in week 1, where, quite frankly, the Sooners didn't need to be anything more than vanilla as possible to win that football game. Bobby, what are the things that stand out to you about our week 2 opponent?
I think the biggest thing is just that they are a good football team. They're better than they were last year. The quarterback play looked good. But again, to your point, it's really hard when they, pulled everybody pretty early and just didn't show a lot of their cards. I think their quarterback, Jackson Arnold, looked really good. 17 of 25 for 141, 4 touchdowns. And a quarterback rating of 168. That's pretty salty, man. That's pretty salty. So it's going to be a tough one. I don't see the Cougs necessarily coming out and winning this one. Defensively, they looked good. I watched their game on and off while I was kind of doing other things. And once the second half hit, you could tell they really took their foot off the accelerator. So it's kind of hard to go off what they do. You're playing a top 25 team at their house. Their fans are going to be pumped. They're apparently wearing throwback jerseys, which I'm excited to see. So it's going to be a good atmosphere. You know that they're going to want to play well, and their fans are going to get pumped up for the throwbacks. For some reason, throwback games just always seem to bring a little bit of extra juice for the team. So overall, to your point, it's a very tough thing to kind of judge where they're going to go from here. But the Cougs are going to have to play offensively better than they did this past week.
Breaking
obviously,
news.
yeah. But I think defensively, if they can come out and play like they did, I don't know if Oklahoma's going to put up 51 like they did. But if the Cougs can hold them to 28-31, something like that, I'm going to be very happy with that performance.
Yeah, the guy really stands out to me. Their blue chip sophomore quarterback Jackson Arnold. They really had been doing a lot, in the transfer portal, even before the portal was a big thing. I mean, you have Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and then more recently Dylan Gabriel, all guys who started their careers at different college programs, and not for lack of trying. I mean, Caleb Williams started his career in this program. Spencer Rattler started his career in this program, but I think they finally have their guy who's going to be that heir apparent since he enrolled before last season's spring practice. Arnold's not the biggest guy, but has a very good arm. And while I wouldn't call him a run-first quarterback, he's more than good enough to call his own number and make things happen in the run game. I say this in the most complimentary way possible. He wasn't a consensus 5-star, the top player in Texas, simply because he has freaky tools. Like, the guy's a good football player. The guy is a smart football player. They have a really balanced rushing attack. I would expect 3 or 4 guys to get a good amount of snaps, which I guess isn't that unusual in this day and age. One of those guys, a true freshman, Taylor Tatum from Longview. I think we'll also see a fair amount of Gavin Sawchuk, Javante Barnes, and Sam Franklin. Franklin's a cool story. Was an FCS All-American who now has a chance to play at one of the sports blue bloods. One notable player they will not have is Jalil Farouk, who suffered a foot injury last week, will be out. I think I saw around 6 to 8 weeks. I expect to see plenty of tight end Bauer Sharp as well. The passing numbers don't really pop, but very efficient, like you said, did everything he needed to do. And I think the passing numbers not really popping is as much about the Sooner offense not needing to be anything other than pretty vanilla. I mean, offensive line has been a bit of a mash unit early for the Sooners. Their projected right tackle, Jake Taylor, and their projected center, Brandon Hickman, were out or played sparingly in week 1, though from what I read, neither sounds like long-term injuries. The really scary thing is this Cougar offense, which looked very not good against UNLV, against this Oklahoma defense with a defensive-minded head coach in Brett Venables, and it was Temple, but a defense that looked very much living up to the preseason hype. They have a returning All-American, Billy Bowman, who, funny enough, their most notable offensive and defensive players are both from Denton. Billy Bowman on the defensive side of the ball, and Jackson Arnold on the offensive side of the ball. Different. I think one of them went to Ryan and one of them went to Geyer, but still crazy there. But also returning key guys like Danny Stutzman, Dominic Williams. Kip Lewis is a younger guy. Last year worked his way into being a starter, who's now an entrenched guy in 24. You could also say that for Kendall Doby as well, who plays their defensive back hybrid position, the Cheetah. They had 6 sacks and 6 forced turnovers against Temple. I mean, it goes without saying, but this is a much more fearsome opponent than the one who we just saw really kick the Cougar offensive line's butt mercilessly last week. I mean, I don't know what the ceiling is for what this Cougar offensive line is capable of doing, but if they don't eat their Wheaties and figure out how to pass block, I think we're going to start worrying about the health of Donovan Smith and all the other quarterbacks in this roster. And I'm not saying that to be glib. It's just a statement of fact. OU is magnitudes better up front than your last opponent.
Yeah, and I'm one thing I am interested in is how does the staff adjust to realizing just how bad their offensive line was, right? Are we going to see more design rollouts? Are we going to see more max protection, right? Where you send out 2 guys, maybe 3 guys out on a route. Are we going to see more big sets? Parker Jenkins, what did he have? Like 2 rushes?
Yes.
I think it was. Yeah, he had the ball twice. Are we going to, even if we're going to get stuffed, we abandoned the rush pretty early on. And so I'm curious how we're going to adjust in that sense. Are we going to come out and continue to fall behind and then get worried that the rush isn't working, so we're going to put it in Donovan Smith's hands, which has actually looked worse than our rush game has? So, I am curious how we are going to adjust, and then how do we react to a much, much, much better defensive line?
Yeah, something tells me I cannot at all back it up with anything that's actually happened on the field that I don't know if it's going to be a good performance. I don't think this is going to be a game where the Cougars are that close when it's all said and done, but I don't think we're going to see a carbon copy of what we saw week 1. Don't ask me why. Don't say, "Hey Sam, what on earth did you see from the Cougar offensive line that gave you any kind of indication that this is going to get better?" I couldn't tell you. It is purely a vibes thing here. I think it'll be better, but don't misinterpret me saying I think it'll be better for I think this will be a meaningfully close football game.
Yeah. Don't take I think it'll be better to being it'll be good, because it can be better while still not being good, so if it again, I'm very interested in how we are going to change the looks that we are giving the other teams.
Bobby, is there, and you could answer this no, is there anything you could say that would make me feel not terrible about this game? Other than the fact that I am excited for you genuinely to go to Norman. Like Dustin and I went up there for the 2019 opener. And I feel like it's kind of a coin flip from like, oh, this is a really cool college football atmosphere, to me going there in person being like, yeah, this lives up to the hype. I would say when I went up there, OU lived up to every bit of the hype as an in-person experience, as a, oh yeah, I get why people say this is a temple of college football. Like, I know I have biases towards the Longhorns, and that stadium can get loud, but it's not a fearsome atmosphere unless they have a national championship contender, and it is a nightmare to actually experience it. Like, I left when Dustin and I went to UT Iowa State in 2018. I just left that game being like, how do people do this on a week in, week out basis? This sucks. This is a nightmare. It's not like, oh, I'm surrounded by Longhorn fans. It's like I am cramped. We had to walk a literal mile to get to a garage that was under $50. Like, how do people do this? Whereas the Oklahoma thing was,
my dad, when he was talking about when I was in school, he had gone to a game at Texas, and he was like, I prefer Robertson. He's like, it feels like a college atmosphere. He told me Texas just feels too much like a professional game, and there's something, the pageantry and all that goes with college, that makes the college game so special. And he's like, that's missing from the Texas game. So I am very excited about heading to Norman. But to answer your question about things that would make you not dread this game, I am excited to see how this defense does. How do they follow up that pretty good week 1 performance? How do they do against the top 15, top 20 team in terms of their offense? How do they do against a quarterback who just does everything right? Like, what does the defense look like when they have one quarterback to prepare for? Right?
Yeah, that's going
against UNLV. They had multiple guys that they kind of had to prepare for that kind of did the same thing, but did different things at the same time. What does this defense look like? I think this is going to be a big bar for the defense to see how are they going to do the rest of the year, right? Like, if we can come out and we can do well against OU, hold OU sub 30 in terms of defensive points, maybe we get another fumble recovery or a kick return or something like that. But I mean, actual defense, if they can hold OU under 30, that's something to really, really get excited for this team going forward. So that would be the one thing that I would tell you, watch the game so you can see this.
I like it. All right, Bob, you want to hear about how bad we were at picking last week's game briefly here?
I don't really need to hear, but I do know. So go ahead, wrap it up. Let's go.
So we were combined 0 of 3, Bobby. You had the over, and I had the over as well, 54.5 points. Very much went under, a total of 34. You also had UH money line. Did not hit there. So by virtue of being a less adventurous picker in week 1, I am leading 925 to 825. But don't worry, Bobby. I'm getting a little crazy in our week 2 edition of Down the Pickness here. I am taking U of H plus 30 with 40 imaginary pod bucks, and I am taking the over 49.5 for this game with 75 pod bucks. I am going out on a limb for reasons even I don't entirely understand. What are you feeling here for these week 2 lines and such?
So I am actually going to play conservative this week. I'm going to take the University of Houston plus 30, and I am going to put 75 imaginary pod bucks on that. I don't see U of H winning, obviously, but 30's a lot of points, and OU barely covered against Temple because they took their foot off the gas. If U of H has it within 24 heading into the fourth quarter, are we going to see some backups? Are we going to be able to? That's more what I believe is keeping me from the 30. It's not that I think we're going to keep this game close or something like that. I just think that it's going to be 28 heading into the fourth, and we're going to get Donovan Smith is going to lead a drive against the third string Oklahoma team, and they're going to go down and score a touchdown and get a field goal or something like that. That's going to happen in the fourth that leads us to covering.
I did a guest spot with our Oklahoma friends through the keyhole yesterday on Labor Day, and he kind of said something that I think kind of covers my half-baked logic here. Is Venables is a defensive guy. I think he's a lot more willing to sit on a 24, 28 point lead late than an offensive guy like Lincoln Riley, their last coach, for example, and a more offensively minded head coach. I think he doesn't mind having it around 30. I think the Cougars just barely get it under that number. But if history's any indicator, don't tail what Bobby and I do, and don't take what we do here as any kind of gambling advice. You ready to talk about a sport that fared a little bit better this past weekend, Bobby?
Sure, let's go.
Let's talk about Cougar volleyball. We knew it would be a challenging opening weekend for the Cougs in Omaha. Something about this program and dramatic matches in the city of Omaha, if you'll recall the 2 games of the 22 NCAA tournament. So just generally, what did you like about what we saw from the Cougs in the first 2 matches of the 24 season?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me that I took away from it that got me, quote, excited was just the fighting in the Omaha game, right? Am I necessarily thrilled that it was that difficult to beat a Omaha team that you probably shouldn't have let stay around? Not necessarily. It doesn't excite me a ton, but the way that the Cougs kind of just held their own throughout it, if that makes sense. So that is what has me most excited, was watching this team just play in that way and not and not give up. It's sometimes you let teams hang around you like that, and you teams that shouldn't be on the same level as you kind of let them hang around, and then they believe, and then they just kind of sneak one past you. And those are the little things that affect your seeding and can hurt you later on. And for the Cougs to come out in that 5th and decisive set and just come out and just dominate and go 15-7 is really good. They also, in the sets that they did lose, they had one bad set. I would argue they had one bad set in that first game where they lost 16-25. But everything else was within the 2 points, but they also didn't blow them out outside of the fifth set. So overall, really good. And then just to go into and play a team in Washington State that's receiving votes, that is going to be probably an NCAA tournament team, most likely, and to just come out and beat them 3-1 pretty decisively as well, 25-12, 25-16, 25-19, while losing 18-25 in that second set. Some big rallies in there. Just overall, really, really good performance. And that's what I like to see, just because we were able to take a couple of shots and not face anything too bad.
Yeah, the Omaha game match scared me at first, because that's a 23 NCAA tournament team, season opener. So they've been itching to get on the court for 8 or 9 months, and again, not a name team, but a team that was in the postseason last year, a team that I think we noted, we previewed them, played a lot of really good teams last year. So the prospect of playing a team at UH's level, not alien to the veteran players. Like they played a lot of top 20, top 25 caliber teams. And as funny as it is to say it out loud, because there were so many years when that was not this program, U of H volleyball is a target now. U of H volleyball is where Cougar men's basketball was 5 or 6 years ago after, good season under Sampson. Like, oh yeah, you're now a target. Especially now that you're a Big 12 program. Like you are now a circled on the calendar opponent for a good number of the non-conference teams on their home court to, at the big annual event that they have. I think everything about it screamed first game upset. And like you said, that that they didn't end up there. And obviously, host didn't go quietly. That second set that you referred to, I would say, yeah, probably the one bad set that the Cougars played all weekend, because the one set that Wazoo won, they hit like over 500. It's kind of just like, not to keep using other sports analogies, but it's like playing an opposing basketball team and they're just hitting 60-65% uncontested threes. Like, they're just hot, man. What can you do about that? Everything
It
they're
happened
hitting
to
is
us in
just
the
landing in
NCAA
the
tournament
lines.
last year.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just,
or 2 years ago with Miami.
Yeah,
when Miami was just making everything. You're just like, oh, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
Sometimes you got to tip your hat.
Yeah, and to have played 9 sets and to really only have like 1 or 2 where you can quibble with the performance, I think that's really impressive, because there's so many new faces, new veterans like Angela Grieve from Miami and Avery Shemitis from Pepperdine, freshmen, Addison Pohl and Lily Barron, who we name checked both of them in the preview, who I think gave you a lot this week at Baccarat Rahman, one of your middle blockers, who's being asked to play a lot bigger role with Kellen Morin out for the season with an ACL, I believe it was. So many new faces, new faces playing bigger roles like Rahman, new faces in the veteran transfers like Grieve and Shemitis. Even Katie Corelli's now a new face. Katie Corelli played a lot last year, but Katie Corelli is certainly playing a bigger role on this year's team than she did 12 months ago. So it's a lot of different players having to do a lot of different new things, whether it's new to the program or new role within this program. And I think that generally is what really impressed me, that they put their foot on the gas at the end of the first match against Omaha, and that despite the first 4 sets mostly being pretty nervy stuff, kind of stuff we've gotten used to whenever the Cougs play in Omaha, that you slam the door shut on them. I want to give our old co-host the assist on this one. Really crazy stat from the end of the Omaha match. The Cougars, 6 of the final 11 points that U of H won in this match came from blocks, after that only being the case 4 of the previous 93. And Baccarat Rahman, who I've mentioned a couple times now, was a big part of that, and someone who's going to be playing a bigger role. Certainly a big part of that strong finish. 2 of your 3 kills leaders from the first match were first-year Cougs, Angela Grieve and Avery Shemitis. Katie Corelli led you with 14. Annie Cook led with 30 assists, but Rebecca Rakasan got the start at setter. Really seems like you're going to see both of them, though. I think Cook played the most of the final 3 sets. Kate Georgiadis leading all players in digs, and Addison Pohl in her Cougar debut having 5 total blocks, 2 solo of the 3 total from the Cougs, which I thought was really impressive. And that the way that you came off a really emotional win against a opponent on their home court and largely outside of the second set dominated Wazoo. I thought that was really impressive. Other than that one set where they just hit out of their minds, I thought it was really impressive that coming off an emotional win, came back out there on Saturday and really took care of business. And really, much as I, as a sports fan generally, enjoy the drama of a close win, like that we had a lot less stressful Saturday win.
Yeah, to your analogy, I love when people are like, I hope it's a good game. I'm like, I don't. I hope we win by 50, and then I'm bored halfway through. But Kate Georgiadis being named Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week. I don't know if it was you or our former host.
I think it was me. I know what you're going to say. I think 71, it was me.
What is it? 81% of the world is covered by water. The other 19 is covered by Kate Georgiadis.
71%.
Just 71, potato. But overall, just what a performance by her this weekend. It's going to be sad when she goes, because you know that you have the defense there that is just, she's able to lock you down. And even when teams are hitting out of their minds, Kate Georgiadis is going to be a stalwart in that defense and just really, really set you up well.
All-time Coug. And I think that might even be underselling it. Shout out Lily Barron, who I mentioned earlier. 5 kills and 8 digs, and a highlight reel kill on a play where you would have thought she had no shot to even get a clean hit, much less a non-returnable winner like the one she hit. Like, I think Dave Rare mentioned it when he came on with us last season, that getting the Big 12 invite has opened some doors in recruiting that weren't previously open to Houston Cougar volleyball, and I can think of no 2 better examples than what you saw from Addison Pohl and Lily Barron. I don't want to take it on faith, because transferring is never more common than it has been, but the staff has done such a great job keeping players and developing them in the program. If this is what we're already seeing from Pohl and Barron, oh man, like junior, senior year, these are going to be incredible volleyball players. They're already contributing to what I think is a borderline top 25 team.
Yeah, it really feels like Kelvin Sampson situation where he brings in talent and the guys just don't leave. Again, knocking on wood here, but like it just feels like players don't leave and then he just brings in good talent. You know, players don't leave early to transfer. Granted they could, but you don't see it as much. So, really good signs there.
Yeah, and of course, like, and Angela Grieve, I mean, she was a multi-time All-ACC outside hitter, so it's like, okay, well, we expect her to come in, but still don't take it as a certainty and that she immediately comes in and is contributing like she is. I think that's pretty cool too. So coming up for the Cougs, unless you have any further thoughts about the weekend
let's talk the next week of Cougar volleyball.
Yes, sir. The Flo Hyman Classic, which I'll always associate with getting paid in pizza and wearing a one size too big ball boy polo. When
size is gracious
for me? I'm a big fat guy. You probably were more like 4 or 5.
Dude, it was like I wore a medium back then. Whew. And it was like a 3X, and it was just like, what the hell? And it was, yeah. So continue. Sorry.
No. I was gonna say, I always will associate this event with volunteering as a ball boy at the 2008 Flo Hyman at the old Court the Athletics Alumni Center. Cougs will be opening at the much nicer digs of the Fertitta Center on Thursday at 7 p.m. Against UNLV. The Cajuns, or I guess Cajunettes. We'll say Cajuns.
We'll go with Cajuns.
Went 1-2 in their opening weekend event. Actually hosted it, losing to Jackson State and UTA. Were 4th out of 7 in their division in the Sun Belt West. So don't expect a big challenge, but we do get a great libero on libero matchup of Kate Georgiadis and the 23 Sun Belt libero of the year from UNLV, Mio Yamamoto. But that is all I have on Cajuns volleyball.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to your point. Went 1-2 with some straight set losses. They lost.
I saw it was at their. I looked at their website. I saw it was at their own event. I'm like, oh, like
yeah,
be Jackson State, your own event.
And you remember back in the day, back when we were ball boying it there, you know, you would bring in a marquee team into this event. Like we had Baylor when Baylor was like 1 or 2 in the country. Buddy, we're the marquee team in this event now. Like we're the team that is like, yeah, you want to come play? Come on. Yeah, come on. Yeah, you'll have a good time. Come play. Come establish yourself and see where your program's at against a good team. And as I say that, I know that means we're going to lose one of these games this week, but it's just a weird feeling, you know, like I remember there was this girl for Baylor who was just like incredible. She was doing things on the volleyball court that I had never seen. And we had a woman on our team at that point who now plays for the Canadian national
future
team.
pro.
It's not like she was bad, but that girl for Baylor was jump serving. And I remember she did a jump serve and hit the first one. And I just remember being like, oh, we're not going to have fun today. Like, this is not going to be a good time. But, like, now we're that team that is doing things that, like, I've never seen before. I've never seen a libero as good as Kate Georgiadis in volleyball. So it's very much, I was thinking about that as I was looking at the schedule, is like, it comes full circle and, like, now we're the team, we're the host of the tournament and we're actually the marquee team in it now.
Pretty wild stuff. Can't thank Dave Rare enough for getting us there. Cougs will also be in action Saturday at 5 p.m. If you are not going to be in Norman, I can think of a few better entertainment options than going over to Fertitta and checking out the Cougs. Take you on Northwestern State. The Lady Demons did a little bit better their first weekend. They were 2-1 at the Southern Miss Invitational. They beat Jacksonville and Southern, but did lose to the host. USM were predicted 7th out of 12 in the Southland Volleyball preseason poll. Only thing I have to add, Bobby, first head-to-head between these two programs since back in the Bill Walton era, 2004,
which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, like I know they're way up in Natchitoches, so more the Shreveport part of Louisiana. But you would have figured we would have faced them at some point more recently. But yeah, alas. That's it for volleyball. Don't have a ton to add about Cougar soccer, though they did have a positive week, at least relative to what standard of that program. Beat UTSA, recent standard. I mean, talking about a program a couple episodes ago we were, I think, talking the post game of losing 3-1 to Sam Houston. I think Ariana Jimison being back like we expected certainly has raised the level of play in that program. She had both goals in that win over UTSA. The only other thing I have to add there is 14 saves and goal by Olivia Dietrich. Not a bad day of work as UTSA was really trying to, because UH got the 2-0 lead pretty early, and UTSA really attacked late. And I thought Olivia did a good job keeping the Cougar dub safe in that one.
Yeah, team looks different when you are fully stocked up, ready to go. When they are at full health, it does seem that the team's going to look a little bit different.
Imagine that. Also beat Texas State 3-2 on the road. Did lose a 2-0 halftime lead, but Juliet Moore, shout out to Juliet, scored the program's first hat trick in 8 years and won the game with her 60th minute winner and third goal. Texas State, not great shakes. UTSA, not great shakes, but we'll point out that this program lost to Texas State on their home field last year. So maybe a sign that the Cougs are fractionally better at this point. And certainly, I think, playing better soccer than when you didn't have Ariana Jemison, or I feel like I've seen Jocelyn Alonso, the transfer from Memphis, that I was really excited about. I feel like she's been playing more minutes, so maybe maybe that's a health thing as well. And if you're getting something closer to your fully healthy roster, I don't know if I'm really changing my season outlook yet. I've been burned by that once or twice with this team before.
Hell, last year.
Yeah, last year, but I don't know. I am fractionally more optimistic than I was after that Sam Houston game, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely less. We need to figure out the next coach that we're going to bring in over the next few months to, like, okay, now that Jemison's back, this team does look different. Like, even just watching the game, again, not a huge guy who's like, oh yeah, let's break down the 5-4-2-1 or whatever it is, the 5-3-2-1, or that's not me. That ever will be me when it comes to soccer.
I don't want to get your opinion on wing backs and the utility of a wing back versus attacking fullback.
But I'll watch the game and you can just see that it looks a little bit different. The team looks like they're playing with a little bit more fluidity, a little bit more motion, a little bit more confidence as well.
Yeah, so nothing to preview yet. Cougars will be back in action a week from Thursday against the always difficult UCF Knights. We'll talk about that more in depth as the Cougs look ahead to Big 12 play next week. But Bobby, I think that's it for us in the world of Cougar sports this week. You want to take us home?
Is that it? I think so.
Shout out Branch Cox, Cougar cross country runner, won the UIW Twilight last Friday in the opening cross country event, the opening track and field event of the season with cross country season kicking off. So shout out Branch Cox. I did not have that in my notes, but I remembered it just off the top of the dome from Friday.
And we did lose Louis.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Louis Hinchcliffe. Yeah.
We need to. You all right if we talk about that? Man. Just for a split second. That's a really that one really sucks for Cougar track and field. Makes sense though.
Yeah.
One of those things that I totally understand. Like, oh yeah, you're one of the best runners in the world. Why would you not want to go pro?
Yeah, how do you follow that up in college? Like, I mean, as much as I would love to see it, like how do you follow up winning the 100?
Yeah. You won the Natty. What are you gonna win the 200? Like, no, you did it. Go make your money. Go play the Diamond Series. Go do the tour. All that. Nothing but hat tips to Louis Hinchcliffe in going forward and going pro. So good luck to him. I know if you would have paid me what he's going to make, I probably wouldn't have stayed in college as long as I did either. So
yeah, an all-time Coug, certainly an all-time 1 year Coug, and we appreciate the 1 year of Louis that we did get.
Yeah. So, all right, let me take us home. That's it for this week's pod. Just some final housekeeping. Sam does it in the beginning. You get me at the end. I don't know which is better, but if you have some feedback for us or you want to talk U of H sports, you can find us on Twitter at SH Podcast. You can find just me at #1Coug. So if you want to go look at my argument I had with previous co-host and good friend of the pod, you can go back and read that and see their thoughts on it. And if you just want to talk to Dustin because you miss him or that you really want his opinion on the soccer team, you can reach out to him at bsky.social or podcast at bsky.social. Sorry,
how are people gonna get to Blue Sky? Otherwise, they don't know where to go.
My bad. If you hate social media and just use your email, you can email us at shpodcast@gmail.com. Now, if you've heard all of that, you heard this wonderful podcast that we just did, this hour, 10-minute long podcast that we just did, and you're like, hey, I want to support those guys financially. They don't make any money off this or hardly make any money off this. They do this as a labor of love, and I appreciate that. You can please throw some money at us on our Patreon. Minimum is $5, but if you want to do 5 million, Mr. Fertitta, if you're listening, we will take it, and we will produce some really cool content. We'll travel to all the games, all that. If you
I've
want to,
never said anything bad about Bubba Gump or the Rainforest Cafe that you could find.
You know, my favorite part of the Rainforest Cafe is definitely the simulated rainfall. That's really cool and isn't weird when you're trying to eat dinner.
No, it definitely does it
Love
for me,
it.
whatever it is. It does it.
So, or if you're one of our other alumni who is like, hey, I'm really tired of donating money to the program. I want this to be called the whatever podcast. We'll probably do it. But if you are still here, you heard us talk about all the ways you can give us money or reach out to us. You're an absolute rock star. And as always,
go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!